welcome to another episode of Trident Talks. I'm your host, Gareth Davies. I specialize in building go-to-market teams for early and growth stage vendors, and we're live in Las Vegas. And as you can tell, it's taken my soul and my voice, but I'm welcomed by Ken Johnson,
Thanks.
DryRun Security. Ken, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Ken Johnson. I'm the CTO and co-founder of DryRun Security, and I've spent a couple decades in software security. That's really just been my whole background is mainly like code level security.
Cool. And what possessed you to create DryRun back in 2023?
Oh, there are lots of reasons. Mainly, I spent a lot of time with, I've spent a lot of time with static application security testing tools, SaaS tools, dynamic tooling, really just tooling of all kinds. And I really saw a pretty major gap in what was offered, right? And to be fair, when I say things like that, what I really mean is that, there's a natural evolution with any field, with any product, with processes. There's just evolution, there's improvements. What we've done to date has been a very necessary sort of approach with tooling. But I will say that with AI coming out, I saw sort of like an opportunity to improve on the things that, or the ways that we were doing things. And I can point to some very specific problems that all practitioners deal with, which are, noise and alert fatigue. I think everybody's pretty done with that.
Yeah.
I also think this might sound controversial, but I think ASPMs are sort of a symptom of a problem, which is this way to manage this way to manage noise and fatigue and alerts. What do? We capture bug tickets and then we aggregate them and we try to manage bug tickets. We just spend all of our time on these bug tickets. And really all of that sort of falls out of this place where it's like, you can go one of two routes. You can flag on just about everything, right? And you can say, well, hey, you have 1,000 vulnerabilities, right? And maybe you think there's value in that. The reality is there's not value in that, but you are casting a wide net, so you will catch everything. But again, probably 800 out of those 1,000 are at least not real. The other options to go like strictly into a pure, I have to make sure this is exploitable kind of direction. That's another way to go. But the problem is that you don't warn people about certain things. And this is really, I'll just get down to the crux of the real kind of scenario I was facing, which is like, imagine you get another bug bounty report, right? And that bug bounty report says, all right, well, we've got this critical issue in your application. And you say, all right, cool. All right, I need to go figure out like what's going on there, right? And you do some peeling back and you realize your tooling never actually alerted you to these pretty significant risks that were introduced in the code and led to this bug bounty report. And when you peel that back farther, what you really start to begin to understand is that these tools have operated in a very stringent, very kind of dumb way with no real understanding of the code in front of it. It's just looking for, are these words in this order and follow this pattern? Sure. Has no idea about the code itself. So what that leads to is a situation where, and just kind of bringing this all together, you have significant vulnerabilities being introduced. You ask, why did it not find that? And it's because, hey, we're looking for specific patterns, and it has to be something that's actually exploitable. And otherwise, we don't have any understanding of the intention of that code change. We have no understanding of, the impact on the wider code base and the risks associated with it. So we saw, and just to like bring this all together for real, we saw this massive gap that we could fill, where we have now contextual understanding of why is this code change happening, what is it going to impact, and what risks fall out of that, and how can we communicate that in a way to developers that allows them to get to resolution.
So obviously the problems that you're solving now have been problems in the industry for a number of years, right? It's something that you will have been dealing with on a daily, weekly, monthly basis while you were at GitHub. So yeah. What was that pain point when you were like, right, I'm so done with this, like I need to create a solution? And obviously you've gone down the AI native route, right, which differentiates you from a lot of the tech in the AppSec space. So yeah. What was that pain point where you were like, right, I need to solve this because this is this is too much. I just need to solve this problem.
Yeah, there's kind of two specific, and I'll expand upon what I was kind of talking about. But before I do that, I'll talk about like one thing that was really, really difficult was that we had a pretty robust set of ways to authorize and different actors that are authorizing to the application. So what that means is you get an authorization matrix, so to speak, that is very complex and hard to enforce correctly. So meaning like every time I add a REST API endpoint, it is very likely if I don't do everything correctly, I could introduce a critical vulnerability bypass where somebody can just access that endpoint.
Sure.
So we put together a very, very lengthy document on the right way and the wrong way to do this. Here's the issue. There are a lot of ways, depending on the context of the code that's being introduced and the intent of it, that can go wrong. Like me trying to write a rule or 500 rules to try and detect every way that authorization can be invoked incorrectly is not realistic. So what would happen is we just end up having the same vulnerability, variations of the same vulnerability over and over and over again. And that's why, in our product, we have this thing called natural language code policies. So I can ask it a question. I can say like, hey, do you see an authorization problem in our REST API endpoint? And then I could give it some background information, examples of ways I've seen it go wrong and examples of ways I've seen it go right. Just being able to talk to a system and give it that tribal knowledge and then enforce that tribal knowledge on every code change is a game changer. You don't have to teach developers how to write rules. They don't have to learn how to code up in this domain specific language and syntax of whatever the product is. They can talk to it like a human being and get that enforced on every change. So that's the first thing that I think we really did to help practitioners and solve a pain point I saw.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool. It's nice that you've created a problem. A solution for a problem that you were experiencing, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's what makes the product so special, is because if you were a practitioner at GitHub, for example, you would love this product in your environment, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I would want to point it to that document I created and then have it enforce that policy. And that's
Yeah.
the world that we're
Yeah,
living in and creating.
Okay. So AI is obviously booming now, right? There's a lot of businesses that can scale and sell for multiple multipliers, right? In
Yeah.
a short space of time. So what made you take that risk? But making AI a huge part of your product.
Something had to change, and it was a huge risk. I mean, just to call it out, we talked about this. Essentially, I had we'll say thought leaders in the industry, people that are well known, have been in the industry for a long time, who were very critical of AI when it first came out. Very, very skeptical of any capabilities whatsoever
So
for
fear of the unknown,
security.
right?
Fear of the unknown, exactly. And I think a little bit of that's like, what is the company that you work for? What is their business purpose? I'm sure there's some other things mixed in there, but
Sure.
I'll say that there was a lot of pushback and it was a big risk. And here's sort of the way that we saw this or saw the value. So we're doing some testing, right? Imagine all we're trying to do is we did everything deterministically. We did everything in a variation of the old way, we'll say, when we first started the company, and we were doing some testing with AI for improvements, right?
Sure.
We'll say improvements to the product and the way it behaved. However, once we started feeding it more and more code and package files and started realizing its capabilities of breaking down an application and understanding the context of an application, like what are the elements that make up the application, what are the risks that we should think about when you understand a bit about the business purpose of an application, what kind of sensitive data it will store. Does it have like those overly complex authorization schemas, which require really digging in, right? That never existed. So when we started feeding it information and then it was performing okay, we'll say, analysis, that was probably the eureka moment where it was like, we finally have something that we can talk to.
Yeah.
And that understands this code and what it's looking at.
Okay, cool. So obviously the AppSec space hasn't changed a lot over the years, right? A lot of the vendors kind of do a lot of the same things.
Yes.
There's been vendors that do scanning for years, right? There's not really been any change, right?
Sure.
So implementing the AI into your product, do you think that's why there was such a pushback on kind of what you guys were doing? Because like you really were disruptors in the space.
Yeah, I mean, because everybody sort of took this. There was actually, I should say, there was probably two main ways I saw people use AI if they were going to use AI. One was validation. So they use the old way of capturing flaws, but then to reduce that noise, they validate whether or not it's real through AI. That was one way. The other is the auto-suggested fixes. So like this is us saying, well, we think we see an obvious, vulnerability, again, using the old way of finding vulnerabilities. So let's go ahead and give you an auto-suggested fix using AI to create that auto-suggested fix. What we saw with that was essentially the dependent bot problem all over again, where you just have a lot of open pull requests where they're not being addressed. These things aren't, nobody really cares. They don't see any value in it. Or if they do, it's just maybe that's not the kind of fix that they would have, as a developer, said that they wanted to implement. Neither of those two were very interesting. Our approach was completely unique because we said, why don't we start with detection? Start with AI first on the detection front. So let's use AI to learn about the application and find the vulnerabilities using LLM first versus putting LLMs on the back end for sort of incremental feature. Like essentially, we just completely went a totally different route engine wise from anything that has ever existed, and used AI completely different from the other companies.
Sure. Yeah. There. Okay. So you mentioned within your product, like, and the problems you were facing was around that alert fatigue, right, within
Yes.
the AppSec space. So does AI help prioritize real risk versus alert fatigue?
With a lot of help.
Yeah.
I want to caution anybody who uses AI systems that there's essentially some moats there. Orchestration is absolutely key. Evaluation is absolutely key. So you want to make sure everybody talks about hallucinations. It's really just a gap in the training set. That's what that really is. And those gaps are going to happen. So you need to like obviously repair those gaps. There's a variety of techniques you can use to repair those gaps, but ultimately you need to know if all of a sudden your system is saying like, oh, you have all these, I don't know, we'll say Python issues in your Java app, right? It's like, well, that's obviously wrong.
Yeah.
So you do have to do quite a bit of work there, but yes, it can be absolutely used with proper orchestration to ascertain risk.
Yeah. Okay.
In a way I've never seen this before. I really haven't. Imagine like I talk to you and I give you 4 different things and I say, okay, these all have varying risks, and also I want you to have this background information about the application, and also here's what the developers and the security staff told us. Like they actually informed our review by telling us a bit about just tribal knowledge, things you can't get from code.
Sure.
That world did not exist, and it does now. So it's very, very cool. You get much more accurate pictures of risk.
Yeah, which I've seen a lot of benefit within kind of the SOC space with AI, right? Like the alert fatigue is massive, right? So brings me to my next question. AI it does really well in some areas, in some others it still needs a little bit of guidance.
Sure.
Where do you think it shines versus where do you think it still needs a little bit of guidance?
Yeah, well, so I'm keenly aware of AI's limitations right now. Yeah, it's okay. So things it's really, really great at: summarizing intention and understanding behavior. So that's one thing it's really, really good at. It does have a far more robust pattern matching, and I say pattern matching. It's always going to feel like some level of pattern matching as long as you're doing token prediction, which is how LLMs work today, right? But instead of having to match exact patterns, right, we can instead say, well, there's some improvisation here. You may have several places in an application you need to navigate and take into consideration before you can actually say whether or not this thing's actually vulnerable. So they shine at, especially when you give them tools like research tools that have access to code. They really do a great job of capturing a lot of data and then synthesizing that and saying, okay, here's a sort of a plan of the things I want to go and look at, and then here's how I'm actually going to go and accomplish looking at those things. And like I said, think of it as much broader pattern detection. So that's where it shines. Where's its weaknesses? Well, frankly, there's a lot of weaknesses. Like I can tell you right now, huge gap is training data around Golang and pretty much all LLMs. So we have to spend a lot of time trying to put them back on the rails when it comes to like Golang style language analysis. But here's the real key too. Like I think breadth, right? So if you have got, I don't know, as we'll say 10,000 files, right, that all need to be searched for some pattern. Well, yeah, it's going to be far more performant to use like an open grep or something like that to easily search for those patterns really quickly in files. But the caveat is AI can on the fly write those rules and run that same tool, just like a human being could run that same tool and get that capability. So while it's a limitation in theory, in practice, if you orchestrate it correctly, the LLM can have the same tools
Yeah.
you use.
Okay. Yeah. So AI is seen as an enabler, right? But there are a lot of folks that are worried that it's going to replace a lot of jobs as well, right? Especially
True,
like
yeah.
kind of the lower level, like for example, the L1 within a SOC, for example, right? That just triage through tickets and then escalate. So you can get a lot of AI to kind of do that for them now, right? So
Yeah, you can.
what's your thoughts? AI enabler or AI is going to take your jobs?
Oh man, I'm torn. I think definitely it's an enabler, right?
Yeah, of
There's no
course.
question that it is,
Yeah, yeah,
right? I mean, just because we wanted to make sure that I'm sorry, just because we wanted to make sure that we were really aware of how and stay aware of how AI native driven development works,
sure.
we've really embraced that inside of our company. But having done that, we've also seen where it falls down, and you do need somebody with some really with some senior skills. I have sat at a dinner where a CTO had said that they prefer having actually lesser experienced devs because they are more in tune with AI native development than their more senior
Sure.
developers. I will admit that does frighten me a little bit. I do think you need those skills to. I think you will need those skills for some time. But back to your original question, I can say that yeah, I feel bad saying this, but I did have a customer who did admit that they won't need to hire another person because of our tooling. That is a direct quote.
Yeah, yeah.
I actually don't talk about it very much because I feel a little torn on that.
Yeah,
but yeah, you might be right. There might be there might, if you optimize. Although, can I just say this? At least with AppSec specifically, we've always had a problem finding people that can do that job. I mean, you all should know that more than anybody.
Yeah.
That's a hard.
That's why they need me.
Exactly. It's a hard skill to find. It's really tough. And so I don't think that's an area where we have just this surplus of people that now will not have jobs. I think
Sure.
it's still a very underrepresented field.
Sure. And AI's impact into application security over the next, usually I would say next 5 to 10 years, right? Because that is usually the scale and how that technology will change. But AI is changing things so quickly. I probably need to narrow it down to what do you think it looks like in the next 2 to 3 years?
Well, I won't get into like the AGI conversation because I don't know. I don't know where that's going to go. I do think LLMs are interesting in the way that we see kind of a slowdown in their performance. So I actually think what we're going to see is incremental improvements on the engines for sure, unless something happens with like the Wolfram Alpha group and they unleash AI in a different way. But assuming that doesn't happen, I think all you're going to see is maybe more of a lean towards open source models getting better to the point where then it becomes a bit of it's competitive. It's going to be difficult for like the commercial LLMs like OpenAI, Anthropic, and whatnot. They'll just have to make sure they kind of have a race there to keep their LLMs performant.
And how much do you think the like an AppSec practitioner's time or their overall job, how much do you think that's going to change over the next coming years?
I think they're going to become more of facilitators than I think anything else. So I say that because I think they're going to have tools at their disposal that automate the majority of their job. And when there's questions, I think they're going to have an assistant there to help guide them through to truth. So if a bug bounty report comes in, they might use the system to validate that bug bounty report, help them validate that bug bounty report. And then from there, they may actually use the system to help run an incident response triage, and that might be interconnected systems. And then I think the follow-up as part of that incident response is always variant analysis, where you look for other variations of that same vulnerability. I think you go to that assistant. It helps you there. I think then that gets baked into, sort of like, oh, these are problems that we've seen, so let's make sure all future code changes don't have those same. I think it becomes this thing where it's like, it's an enabler. You have a Jarvis, we'll say, at your hands.
I think the biggest space we're going to see a lot of changes is maybe that skill set of being able to interpret the analysis and the data that comes out of the AI, right? Rather than you kind of having to solve the issue, the AI will not do it for you, but it's still going to produce you a load of data that you need to kind of then decipher, and then
You do, yeah.
I think it's going to go slightly more down that direction rather than.
I think so, yeah. Oh, you might be right. Actually, keeping the system performant and accurate might be a big part of their role. You're absolutely right. And actually, I think that's like something I've been saying for quite some time now, is that you got to get on the train. You know, you have to learn it. It's going to be important to your skill set, just like mobile apps were to, you know, I guess you'd call them AppSec pen testers or what have you. Yeah, same thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like for example, I'll revert back to the soccer one, because it's where I've spent a lot of my recent time, especially with the AI conversations. The entry level roles of a SOC analyst role, I think the people that want to get into that space or into security in general need to learn or understand more about AI and how it works, right? I think that is because previously you would, if you wanted to be go into AppSec, for example, you would go down that software engineering route, and then you might become a security champion, and then you then kind of go into AppSec, right? But I think with how AI is going to change that, I think the path to you getting to that security role, I think it might slightly tweak how you get there versus what it was the last 5-10 years, right?
It may be, yeah. Actually, you're saying that, and you're right. Like, there's a lot of software developers who come to the AppSec because that's their background. I kind of chuckle at the security champion, because I've just had this conversation where it's like, you come in, you're a good software developer, you're really interested in security, and all of a sudden you find yourself as a security champion, right? But that's cool, because a lot of times that does lead down the path into AppSec, and so you might be right where you go in, you start as maybe a junior role, and you're sort of watching the evaluations occur and how it's performing the system, the LLM system, and then maybe you get into that domain specific part of it where you're like, well, how does it perform for AppSec? And I need to help out with orchestration and evaluation and experience. Those are kind of the three major parts of AI.
Sure.
And so, yeah, and then, you kind of probably contribute, and then over time you just become the two skills sort of raise up. And I think that's actually a very likely scenario. So I said facilitator. I think that's sort of what you're going to say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So my final question: if Ken Johnson was starting off again today, and you thinking, right, I want a path into AppSec, how would you go about doing it?
Oh man, that's actually a really tough question. Well, I mean, I'd say for any field, and it's not unique to AppSec, but I think it's very important is to get involved in the community first. That's always the best way to do it. I mean, whether you're going to volunteer at a like the human networking part doesn't go away. Like, you still need that. Skill wise, of course, there's lots of opportunities for skill acquisition out there. Again, another area I think AI could really help with, learning, like improving your coding skills, learning AppSec, all that stuff's great. But I think it just comes down to like being involved in the community, whether that's, if I was to start over again, I'd go and volunteer at conferences to help out. Yeah. I would contribute to open source, which I did when I started out, and I think that's a hugely, it's a huge win. And then bug bounties, I'd probably spend some time on bug bounties as well.
Yeah, absolutely, 100% agree. I think when I get juniors approach me and saying, "Hey, I've been trying to break into the industry. I've been applying to all these jobs. I'm not even getting into. What am I doing wrong?" And the first question I ask is, "So, how have you been networking?" And they go, "Well, I've not really been going to the event because I don't really know anyone there." And I'm like, "Well, that's actually the first step, right? Get in front of these people, have conversations with real people, tell them what you're trying to do, get guidance from people that have done what you're trying to do."
Yes.
And then another advice I tend to give is,
and it's uncomfortable, but it's important.
It is.
You have to get out of the
You have to get out of your own headspace sometimes, right, to be able to go and do this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think another advice I always give to people that are starting out is, yes, your CV it's important, right? But you need to give context to how what projects you've been working on to try and improve yourself to get to this position. So I always recommend writing reports, attaching links to the GitHub repositories and stuff like that, right? To be able to show that this is actually what I've been doing, not just my CV,
right?
But this is what I've been doing.
Actually, that's that. Well, I mean, we'll say I know with AI that the whole CV uploading and that's all a thing. But I will say, totally agree with you. When I was hiring at GitHub, I cared far less about the actual things on the CV other than what you said, which is how have you contributed? What have you done of meaning, like stuff that shows that you care about, that you actually you want to do this, that you like, show me that you actually, this is interesting to
this
you.
can't be a 9 to 5 job, right? It
No.
needs to be a passion. You need to love this to be able to kind of go far in it, right?
You do have to love it, because you're going to put up with a lot.
Yeah.
You're going to put up with a lot, and yes,
I remember going back. I remember I was working with a pen tester, and I said, like, you know, why are you looking to move? And he goes, well, mate, I'll be honest, I just want to get paid more. Like, I don't love this job. It's a 9 to 5 for me, and I want to forget about it. And I was just like, unfortunately,
heartbreaking.
I just can't represent you,
yeah.
Right? Because it just doesn't go anywhere, right? It's not great.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and I'm torn. I get it. I think that's fair for some folks, but understand that, you know, this is not. It's just, there's some jobs, some occupations in life that require a little bit more commitment than others. That's just the reality.
Tech changes so fast, right? And it's in such a short space of time. And if you're not putting in the research hours because you're genuinely interested in it, then you'll get left behind, right?
Totally not a job for people that. You ever read the book or heard of Who Moved My Cheese? Okay. Well, no. If you ever read it, just, you don't want to be the mouse that just sits there and gorges on the cheese indefinitely until they can't move and the cheese is rotten.
I feel like the mouse.
Always chase. Always learn new things.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Cool. Well, listen, I reckon we end it there. Yeah, it's been amazing to have you on. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Appreciate it. Thanks.